Week 1 is in the books, and a lot went on. There's a lot to talk about, but just a general statement before we get into it. There are some varying opinions on how much Week 1 matters. In my opinion, it matters a lot more to the good teams than it does the bad. If you're a bad team and squeak win, whatever. If you're a bad team and get blown out, you likely don't have the organization in place to rapidly change your game plan and approach to football for the season. But if you're a team like the Chiefs, who lost last year in Week 1 to the Lions, you go in and reevaluate your entire team. You say, okay, we cannot be overly dependent on our wide receivers this year. We can run the ball a whole lot more with our interior O-line and Isaiah Pacheco. You look at the amount of carries Pacheco had Week 1 and compare that to every other week of the season, you realize the Chiefs' offense completely flipped its focus and became a run-first team to a certain extent, even though they have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce at quarterback. Good teams can make adjustments. Bad teams can't. I will never read too much into Week 1, but it certainly matters.
Week 1 matters, certainly when it comes to the win column. It's one of the 17 games that you play, but I don't think it matters in the sense as far as projecting the rest of your season and how good you're going to be. Teams sometimes fall flat on their face in Week 1. There was the Bills against the Steelers a couple years ago, the Chiefs and Lions last year. This year, the Patriots actually won a game when everyone is expecting them to have the number 1 overall pick next year against a team we're all thinking is going to be in the playoffs in the Bengals. So when it comes to that, teams can have a stinker in Week 1 and certainly turn things around later in the season. And I think what we saw over the first 2 quarters over a lot of games, because teams aren't really playing in the preseason, or starters aren't really playing in the preseason anymore, is that it takes those offenses a little bit to warm up into playing at a high level. And with some of these teams, it may take the second or even third game to really get going and at a full head of steam. So in that respect, I think Week 1 doesn't matter as much as far as knowing exactly what these teams are going to look like 6 weeks from now. And for the Bengals, for example,
there's some mitigating circumstances.
Well, with them specifically, but I don't think for a team like that, we don't have to really worry about them until we're 6 weeks in and maybe they're 2-4 and their offense still isn't functioning.
I don't know, man. There are some worrying signs. We can get into that later, but there's a game everybody at home wants to hear our opinions on. A game we both predicted with great passion and gusto. The Minnesota Vikings visited the sacred MetLife Stadium to face off against the New Jersey-based New York Football Giants. Didn't go well for the Giants by any stretch of the imagination. Their O-line, still horrible. Andrew Thomas looked a lot worse than I was expecting he was going to, and he was supposed to be the only good piece on that unit. The Giants offense could not do anything against the Vikings defense. On the other side of the ball, Sam Darnold proved he can be a competent NFL quarterback when put in the right situation. Vikings O-line did a great job protecting him, but he stood up under pressure, delivered on time, and was able to lead the Vikings offense to an early 28-6 lead. Slowed down a little bit as the game went on. Jordan Addison went out and they took the air out of the ball once they had that sucker locked down, but Darnold looked great. He was one of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks in Week 1. Vikings O-line, the Vikings running game looks completely different than it did this time last year. Part of that is the improvement and cohesion on the O-line. Part of that is adding Aaron Jones instead of Alexander Madison. Completely different running back, different talent level, sensational player. I am optimistic about the Vikings season. I was going into this game. That optimism has only increased. And really, they have avoided an embarrassing, horrible, crippling loss. A loss in Week 1 in the manner the Giants had, destroys your season, breaks your fans' morale. Really just a rough go of it. So tell us a little bit more about that Giants loss, Tristan.
It was very painful to watch just how bad they are. And there's 4 people to blame. The biggest being Daniel Jones. Then there's Joe Shane and John Mara, who are the ones who ultimately decided to pay Daniel Jones. And it's Brian Daboll for okaying it and putting his career on the line, coaching that bad of a quarterback. He was underthrowing passes behind the line of scrimmage. He wasn't even attempting to process the field, throws an interception in the red zone into triple coverage, threw a pick 6 on a screen pass. At this point, if there are any Daniel Jones supporters left, there can't be any Daniel Jones. I don't even believe it's possible to have a Daniel Jones supporter left. The offensive line, still bad. And the biggest thing for me is it is kind of a shame at how bad Daniel Jones is and the lack of offensive line they've put together. Because the defense, if they had an offense that could score points, I think they could hang with a bunch of other offenses in the NFL. And the offensive weapons at this point, people are going to bang on the fact Saquon went to the Eagles, but that wouldn't have mattered behind the Giants' offensive line. And the receivers they have, I don't think are all that bad. And with a solid quarterback, I think they'd be able to have a productive offense. I mean, elite number one receiver, a shifty slot receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson. You have Darius Slayton on the outside, who's capable of 700 yards year in and year out and is a solid wide receiver 3 option, but the quarterback is so bad. The offensive line and what they've built, their inability to develop offensive line is so pathetic that this team has no future. And I felt strongly that I didn't think Dable or Shane were going to get fired after this season. That opinion has shifted slightly after this. I think if we're watching Daniel Jones throw 2 to 3 bad interceptions every week and the offense looks completely incompetent, and once again Brian Dable is rolling an offensive line out there that they've drafted and tried to support, that continues to be horrible, I think he's going to get fired again.
You were legitimately shameless. You know that. You try and salvage these points of grace. The Vikings offense should have scored more points, but C.J. Ham fumbled the ball early in the red zone, or in the Giants' red zone. That should have been another long touchdown drive. The defense couldn't generate a pass rush on a weak interior O-line with the exception of Dexter Lawrence, and to call Malik Neighbors a elite number one receiver after 1 week is legitimately a shameless thing. Have some decency. As for your comments about Dable getting fired, yeah, I'd fire him. I'd fire Shane. I'd fire the owner. I'd fire Daniel Jones into the Statue of Liberty from a cannon. It's a rough go of things. The only possible salvation you have here is Malik Neighbors developed. He looked good week 1. I'll give you that. Not elite, certainly. An elite receiver maybe will have got open for more than 2 or 3 catches, but I digress. There needs to be turnover. There needs to be change. The timeline is not there. There is no path to success. The defense you have, even if it is good, which really it isn't, it's a good line, is not going to be there by the time you get your offense worked out. They need to tear everything down. I know they just paid Burns. Time to try and trade him. I know they got Dexter Lawrence. Need to find someone who is willing to take him. You need to sell everything besides Malik Neighbors and maybe Andrew Thomas and move forward as an organization. This is the type of loss and the type of team which you see repeating these games over and over again. Last year, 40-0 against the Cowboys. This game was arguably worse. Just pathetic, pathetic stuff from the New York Giants. There is no future. There is no going forward. Everyone needs to be gone.
Well, I don't think you trade the best players on your team just because you're overall a bad team. It depends on what someone would be willing to give up for someone like a Dexter Lawrence.
I hear the Rams might be willing to give up 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns. Someone should tell the Panthers about that.
Oh, 2 firsts for Brian Burns, a first and a second for Dexter Lawrence.
I'd give more for Dexter Lawrence.
4 first-round picks in next year's draft.
Probably want to go a bit further down the line. Next year's draft does not seem like one you're going to pull your savior quarterback out of.
And then, just to be clear, I wasn't saying their defense is phenomenal or has the potential to be elite. I feel like you overstated that a little bit. I think if they had a competent offense, it is not a stretch of the imagination that their defense would be able to be average, middle of the pack, or slightly above average. Certainly wouldn't be close to top 10. So I'm not trying to put that out there.
Slightly above average is pretty close to top 10 when there are only 32 teams in the league. It's within shouting distance.
But I don't think they're going to get there because of how bad their offense is. And I don't think it's disingenuous to say they have a receiving core that's being let down by the rest of their offense. Just be bad. I mean, there's no other way to phrase that or put it. But I want to talk about the Vikings a little bit because I was very wrong. Admittedly, I was kind of hating on Sam Darnold and blowing up a little bit just because I was kind of wishing he'd be bad, so I'd have to watch Isaiah deal with the Vikings being horrible week in and week out. But
sorry, I'm not like you, pal.
But he definitely surprised me with just how good he was. I mean, the throw he made deep down the left sideline to Justin Jefferson was pinpoint accuracy. He had great throws the entire game. I think, was he 10 for 10 to start the game or something?
12 for 12.
12 for 12. Only had 6 incompletions. Facilitated the offense at a high level. Now,
interception was on a tipped pass, I will say. That's It's a pick, but it's not a bad pick.
And I would agree with that. When they play a better team, when they play the Lions, or if Jordan Love comes back and they play the Packers later in the season, or some of the better quarterbacks that are on their schedule, will he be able to go toe-to-toe with an elite passing attack on the other side of the field? I think that is still left to be determined. But heading into the season, I kind of viewed them as a 6 to 7 win team. I did not think they were going to be all that great. Now, they could still wind up there, but I are more optimistic, and I think their ceiling's more at 9 to 10 wins, where if the Packers really struggle over the next 4 weeks and Jordan Love, they're not able to win games because he's out with an injury, and the Bears continue to struggle because Caleb Williams takes a long time to kind of build up and be productive in the NFL. I mean, we'll talk about him a little bit later with his week 1 performance. They could squeak in as a wild card team now.
You don't know what the word ceiling means in this sense. If you're saying, oh, well, I thought they were going to be a 6 or 7 win team, now their ceiling's 9 wins. Their ceiling is like 12, 13 wins now if Darnold is actually that good of a quarterback. I don't think it's happening. I just think we need to reassess a little bit. And we can reassess after week 2. I am more than willing to admit we did not get a great read on how good the Vikings actually are because of how bad the Giants are. Their defense looked very good, even if they're not converting a ton of sacks, and even if part of it's due to the O-line. The blitzes were generating pressure. You made fun of Daniel Jones for throwing that pick 6. That pick 6 was not his fault. Andrew Van Ginkel made an amazing one-handed catch over a tackle for that. I'm not putting that one on Jones. I'm putting that one on elite recognition
nice of you.
And an elite play. Hey, honestly, the pick in the red zone to Harrison Smith, it was 4th down. He had to throw it somewhere. Like, neither of Daniel Jones'
to the worst possible option.
Yeah, near Harrison Smith's a bad idea considering he's the current NFL leader in interceptions among active players. Probably would have thrown it somewhere else if I was him, but to each their own. All in all, no hope for the Giants, a lot of hope for the Vikings. We don't need to keep banging this drum. The future is slightly brighter in Minnesota and a lot dimmer in New York.
A ceiling of 12 wins is bona fidely absurd.
So let me get this straight. You saw that the front seven played very well. You saw the Vikings O-line play very well against what you're calling a good defensive line, and they've got the weapons, and Sam Darnold looked good. You're telling me if Sam Darnold plays that well and airs the ball out a bit more because they don't have a commanding lead in games more often, you're telling me that team couldn't win 11, 12 games, particularly with Jordan Love being on their schedule early. Now he's injured. Some weaker teams in there. The Vikings have a very easy path to the playoffs if a few things break their way.
I said they have an easy path to the playoffs if things break their way, but I think if you're expecting them to all of a sudden, or their ceiling to be at 12 wins, I think that's crazy.
But speaking of players who need help, Tristan, talk about the rookies.
Rookie quarterbacks, they were all not great to start week 1, and I think something that can be said about all quarterback play this past weekend is the average passing yards for quarterbacks was 185 yards. No one was lighting up the stat sheet. And to go first, Caleb Williams was not great. He was not good. He got away with the victory because special teams showed up for them, and Will Levis threw one of the worst interceptions we have ever seen, along with one of the funniest screenshots we've ever seen from a quarterback's reaction.
A lot to be said for being able to recognize your own mistakes. Will Levis, quick learner, instantly realized, oh man, I've screwed up. It would take going back in the film room for many others to realize it's messed up that bad. One of one recognition by Levis there.
Caleb Williams had some good throws. Most of them were not good throws. More often than not in this game, he was inaccurate, scrambling way too long, trying to make a big play like he would in college. And I think a lot of the mistakes we saw from him in this game were the fact he was getting used to the speed of the NFL. I think he got flustered early. That Titans defense proved to be no joke. They were very good. They were forcing him to make some of those mistakes, and I'm not placing a lot of judgment on him when it comes to the rest of the season, but I think we saw with all of these rookie quarterbacks that the jump from college to the NFL is hard for most of them, and not everyone is going to be CJ Stroud right away.
Well, CJ Stroud wasn't good week 1 either. I'm not going to try and bang the drum and say I was right because it's only week 1, but my gripe with Williams is he cannot play the way he did in college in the NFL. People are trying to say, oh, well, Patrick Mahomes plays the exact same way. No, he doesn't. Patrick Mahomes does not consistently turn his back to defensive linemen and try and make magic happen when there's clearly no magic left. Patrick Mahomes doesn't leave himself open to the hits Caleb Williams did in college. Something has to change with his playstyle. We saw what the result of his playstyle is against a good defensive line in Tennessee. Can he change? Sure. He's athletic. He can move relatively well, but He also did not read the field well. He didn't read the field amazingly in college. He would rely on his guys to get open, would not figure out where the zones were, let his guys beat man defenses, which were more common in the Pac-12. He can change, sure, but he's maybe a bit further away from being that elite special generational quarterback than we were all anticipating. I didn't think he was going to be as bad as he was. I thought he was going to go for at least like 150, maybe a turnover or two, maybe a touchdown. The 90 yards and the amount of sacks he took were pathetic. Granted, again, week one, I'm going to stop saying that. We need to stop giving the disclaimer. The disclaimer's been put out there. We don't need to say it's only week one anymore. You good with that?
Sure.
Sure. All right. Now, Bo Nix, week 1, week 12, week 17, weak knees, weak chest, weak arm, doesn't matter. He didn't look good. Of the rookie quarterbacks, he looked by far the worst. Completely ineffective on any throw which went more than 10 yards downfield. You hear it when the announcers say, "Oh no," as he uncorks the ball beautifully into triple coverage. The Seahawks should have ran away with this game, but they had some offensive struggles. Geno Smith did not play up to his normal standards. They got saved by Kenneth Walker. Good for Kenneth Walker, Michigan State man. That's rough. For a 24-year-old rookie, that's even more rough. I'm actually very pleased with what I saw from Jaden Daniels. A lot of good in his game, and he's one of the older rookies. Nothing good about Bo Nix's performance. Maybe you say, oh, good, he had a rushing touchdown. That was wide open. I could have ran that ball in if given the opportunity. Really a bad showing by Nix. You would like the processing on him to be higher. We expected better from him given how he played in college and what system he was going into. One which relies on those quick passes being effective and when it opens up, those deep balls over the middle. I don't see any point in his career Bo Nix stepping up and delivering the ball over the middle accurately. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's the guy.
I'm not going to be too hard on Bo Nix because, like I said, we said we're not going to mention it, and it's rookie quarterbacks. None of them were great in week one. The one thing I will say that's a little bit more concerning for him, and you kind of alluded to it, is that we expected him to be kind of an elite processor of the game. He doesn't have as high a ceiling or as much athletic potential as Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels do. So when you're throwing two horrific interceptions and you have a lot of inaccurate passes, that does not make you overly optimistic for the rest of the season and potentially his career. But something to speak in support of him a little bit, his top two running backs averaged less than 3 yards a carry. I don't think he has as good of receiving weapons as Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels do. So the Broncos do not have a lot of talent around him in order for him to be successful in his rookie season.
You know, I actually love that excuse. That's the same one people like you gave to Justin Fields, because it means we get even more time with Bo Nix. We get at least one more season where the Broncos try and beef up their O-line or beef up their running backs or beef up their receivers, and we get to watch them go stink it up again. Some quarterbacks just aren't good. Jaden Daniels, the biggest takeaway I had from his game, there were some moments which worried me, but he's doing a better job of getting down, not taking those massive hits. At least he's trying to, which is a big first step. The accuracy, better than Williams, better than Nix, still not amazing. Kind of got left out to dry by his receivers. Not much of a running presence besides himself, which I understand the defense was kind of crowding the box to take away the run because they know Daniels is going to take off. He was the most successful week one. Phenomenal performance on the ground. Could do better as a passer, going up against the best defense, arguably, of any of the three quarterbacks we talked about. I think the vision is there. He needs a lot more backing him up on the other side of the ball. The Commanders' defense is woeful. That needs to be addressed at the deadline or in the offseason, but I am optimistic from what I saw about Jaden Daniels. So the rookie quarterback, well, look, Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy played the best of the rookie quarterbacks. Outside of them, of the three guys who started, he was the best.
Well, he raised the most green flags because with Caleb Williams, there's a bunch of concerns about his tendency to scramble way too long behind the line of scrimmage, inaccuracy issues with Bo Nix. You would have liked to see no interceptions, maybe a couple touchdowns, and a much higher completion percentage. But with Jaden Daniels, the biggest concern me, you, anyone had was, is he still going to take those big hits where you're left questioning if he's going to get back up? And several times during his first NFL start, he's sliding, getting out of bounds, playing smart football. So that gives you a lot more confidence over the rest of the season that he's only going to take contact when he needs to fight for extra yards, and he's going to slide when he's okay with not getting the extra 3 or 4 yards. So I think that was something to be excited about if you're a Commanders fan. And when it comes to being a passer, none of the rookies that started started were good, but he also seemed to be better than the two that also started.
He somehow got his helmet peeled off in a slide. I don't think he got a penalty for that. I need to go watch that play again. Even when Jaden Daniels tries not to get hurt, the defense is making a good effort. What you really like to see, though, the production numbers didn't fall off a cliff. He was still dynamic and effective on the ground despite not fighting for those extra yards. He is still Jaden Daniels without those unnecessary hits. Speaking of taking unnecessary hits, there were a few injuries week 1. Most notably on the Brazilian turf, Jordan Love popped his MCL, is going to miss anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. Based off how bad that looked in slow motion, and everything looks bad in slow motion, I'm inclined to say that's going to be a bit longer. More of the 5, 6, maybe even 7 weeks. Not a good look. Not a good look for the Brazilian turf, not a good look for Jalen Carter for having that late hit on him, and not a good look for the Packers because now you are rolling out Malik Willis at quarterback. And this completely flips the trajectory of the Packers season. A team which was now going to be competing for a wild card spot, the more delusional of us thought they'd be competing for the NFC North, is now going to be fighting to get that last wild card spot. Is going to be struggling to make the playoffs. Because you look at their schedule, teams they play, they have one beatable opponent if the Vikings play the way they did this Sunday. They could maybe pick off the Tennessee Titans. But Malik Willis versus Will Levis as a quarterback battle in 2024 is going to be appalling to watch. Outside of the Titans, I think their defense is better. But man, that is going to be a rough game. Now, the Packers are starting 1-4, 1-5, maybe even 0-6 before Jordan Love gets back. There is no hope for the season. It's done. You are finished there. You can maybe recreate the magic of what you had last year where Jordan Love steps in, gets hot, and takes you to the wild card and then wins a wild card game. But a 0-6 deficit is just too much to come back from. A 1-5 deficit feels like too much to come back from. They got to play good teams in the NFC North to make the playoffs in the back half of their schedule. This is a rough injury to happen to the Packers. I think their season might be over. If it's not over now, it'll be over soon after we see Malik Willis play.
Well, Jalen Carter, dirty player, shocker. And if Josh Jacobs puts on his Superman cape, it is possible they squeak out a few wins that we don't expect them to. Maybe they control the game on the ground. Jacobs has a couple 130, 140-yard games. It's not out of...
The Packers do not have a good enough offensive line to let that happen. They would have to carry the ball 50 times to get 130 yards.
It could happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I don't think all hope is lost because even if Malik Willis is the team's quarterback, which how do you go into a season with your backup quarterback being Malik Willis at this point from what we've seen from him? They still have talented players on offense. They still have a good running back. I tend to agree more with you, but maybe there's a 10% chance they squeak out 2 wins.
The funny part is the Packers traded for Malik Willis prior to the season. What, they get rid of Sean Clifford? They wanted this. They wanted Malik Willis. They said, okay, we revived Jordan Love. We developed him. We'll develop Malik Willis. Tick-tock. You got to develop him in the next 72 hours or so. Get him ready for his next game. I feel bad for the Packers if they weren't the Packers. I really do. A team I actually do feel bad for is the Carolina Panthers. And we are going to ease up on a few teams this week, attribute their complete collapse to it being week 1, talk about them week 2 and they stink up the joint inevitably. Losing Derek Brown, your best defensive player arguably, after you have the game you did against the Saints, feels like a kill shot. It's hard to imagine the Panthers have much hope going forward. Maybe the offense looks completely different in week 2, but the combination of how bad you looked on both sides of the ball, and now you've lost arguably your best player, it ain't good to be a Panthers fan, man. It's you're complaining about being a Giants fan. I think being a Panthers fan is a completely different level of bad right now.
well, last year, while the offense was the worst in the NFL, their defense at least wasn't bad and in many respects was good. And when you lose your best defensive player and your offense, Bryce Young still looks like he has zero confidence throwing the ball down the field, your season gets even longer, especially when you were maybe a little optimistic after some of the offensive pieces that they added. So maybe Jonathan Brooks comes in 4 weeks, 5 weeks into the season, starts to have a Rookie of the Year campaign and gives Panthers fans some level of optimism, but it's hard to imagine something more miserable than being a Panthers fan right now. At least if you're a Patriots fan, you have a week 1
Patriots fans are 1-0.
I know.
And they got the franchise. It's okay to be a Patriots fan right now.
You have a week 1 win, and you have Drake May to look forward to in the future.
Also, the fact that Patriots fans have been alive for 7 Super Bowls or whatever it is, let's not use them as an example, okay?
True.
We maybe a Jets fan or something. I don't know. The Patriots, that's a bad example, man.
Browns fan.
Yeah, Browns fan, fair enough. That might be worse. The conversation is there to be had. Puka Nacua, we do not know anything yet as of the time of this recording. He was getting carted off the field after a Sunday night game due to a knee injury. That could be really bad because Puka Nacua was the one you would assume would stay healthy throughout the year. He's the young guy. He is the hip, exciting weapon when you compare him to Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, the two other big pieces of that offense who have both suffered with injury issues in the past. Now, you wonder, okay, no more Puka Nacua. Kupp's going to get a lot more targets, a lot more catches, a lot more hits on his body. He might get hurt now. Matthew Stafford going to have to drop back half a second longer in the pocket. Someone like Nacua would get open on certain plays. Your second, third receiver just can't. Now, he is at a much higher risk of injury as well. This feels like a death blow to the Rams season if Nacua is going to miss a long period of time. The whole team was a big, well-balanced house of cards. McVay was doing a good job keeping that house of cards up. But now that one's fallen, I think every other one kind of starts to tip down a little bit. And this is a pessimistic mindset. They played all right against a very good Lions team on Sunday Night Football. If they were healthy, I'd say, okay, you can build from this, move on. I thought it'd be more one-sided than it was. Maybe they even win it if they give Blake Corum a few carries, but I digress. Don't need to get into that. But this is a bad moment for the Rams. They may be in just as bad a spot as the Packers very soon.
Is it bad when you lose one of the best receivers in the NFL? Yes, but I think you are heavily overstating what it means for the rest of their season because last year we thought Cooper Kupp was going to be the guy. When he got hurt early in the year, the question was who's going to replace him, and that guy was Puka Nacua. Now, I think also what we need to say about Puka Nacua's knee injury is that he was struggling with a knee injury throughout camp, and they thought he kind of made it past it. Evidently, doesn't look to be the case, and we'll know more about that later this week. But Cooper Kupp is fully healthy. Heading into last year, he was struggling with injury. Now he's healthy. I don't think we're going to be missing a whole lot because we saw it in the Lions game. They spread the ball around. Demarcus Robinson made some plays. Kyren Williams was making some plays. Matthew Stafford is their quarterback, and they almost beat the Lions, and their defense looked very good, especially that defensive line. Jared Verse even had a sack in there.
They looked very good until the Lions decided, oh yeah, we're the Lions. We're going to run the ball up the middle on you. Well, that defense looks spotty, man. You're being very generous with that very good comment.
You're being very pessimistic with thinking their season's completely up in flames with a Puka Nacua injury.
It's a lot harder to run a functional offense when your two best players who you're going to have to force feed touches onto are both old guys. I'd be nervous. It's the same reason we are nervous about the Packers right now. Aaron Rodgers is holding that whole thing up.
Aaron Rodgers doesn't play for the Packers.
Excuse me, the Jets. Who is the Rams' backup quarterback?
I do not know.
Exactly. It's going to be someone like Wolf Blitzer. Teddy Bridgewater might come out retired from the Heisman. Stetson Bennett. Oh, that's who it is. If your championship hopes rely on Stetson Bennett and you're not in the SEC, buckle up. Maybe I'm being a bit of a doomer on that one. Anyway.
The Texans and Colts game is exactly what I expected to see when I turned on the TV to watch them. One of the most exciting games of the weekend. The Texans, we all expected Nico Collins to be the number one receiver. We all expected Tank Dell to make some plays. And if Stephon Diggs is able to settle into this role of being the second/third option, depending on who makes bigger plays that week or who's a bigger part of the game plan between Tank Dell and himself, this Texans offense is going to be lethal throughout the entirety of the year. And one player I kind of need to, not that he's going to watch this or ever see this or even knows who I am, but Joe Mixon, I was very pessimistic about heading into the season, and he had one of the most impressive performances from this past weekend. The Texans handed the ball to him 30 times. He averaged 5.3 yards a carry, and his longest run on the day was 13 yards. So it's not like his average yards per carry was propped up by an 80-yard run, and everything else was 2 yards and a cloud of dust. So from that perspective, I'm even more optimistic about the Texan season. And on the Colts side of things, that Anthony Richardson throw, everyone's seen it, was one of the most ridiculous throws I think I have ever seen off his back foot after slipping. Throws it 65 yards down the field. That was impressive. Did he struggle with some short area accuracy throughout the game? Yes, but when you can do that and you're the threat that he is on the ground, you are hard to stop. I think the Colts offense is going to be very good. I think the accuracy will improve throughout the course of the season, and I feel even more confident that there will be 3 playoff teams from the AFC South, albeit the Jaguars did also let me down this weekend.
Yeah, man, I mean, the highlight throw from Richardson was special. Some other takeaways, though, from his game. Like Jaden Daniels, he did a much better job of avoiding unnecessary hits than I thought he would. I saw him go out of bounds a few times where in previous years in college, in his rookie season, he would have put his shoulder down, tried to get an extra 4 or 5. Very pleased by that. When he did need to take contact, on 4th down, in the red zone, game on the line, that is when I think it's okay to really lower your shoulder and have at. And that's when he stepped up and did. Drove it in for that late score. Saved his coach's bacon from being absolutely fried in the media. Jonathan Taylor did not play well. I kind of was disappointed by that. I thought given the weakness of the interior of the Texans' O-line, the fact they lost Cashman to the Vikings in free agency, their linebackers would be a bit worse. They could pound it up the middle. That just didn't happen. They were not an effective running team outside of Richardson. You say the short area accuracy, which I just say he couldn't complete a pass over the middle under 10 yards. Not good. Still threw a really bad interception. Still completed less than 50% of his passes. There is definite room for improvement there. This looks like the Anthony Richardson of yesteryear as opposed to a completely new player. That's fine. He's essentially a rookie. He only played 4 games. Very pleased by that. CJ Stroud, I talked about going into the year how he was going to have way more interceptions than he did last year. And while he may have thrown 0, he's getting close. Like, there were 3 throws there which bounced off defenders' hands. Like, I don't know about that one, Tex. I just don't know.
What if he sold his soul?
He could not, after the second Michigan loss, he sold his soul. Not even after that. After the Ohio State-Georgia playoff game where his idiot kicker missed the kick, he sold his soul so he would not get screwed over by others' mental errors. Good for him. Whatever. Going to hell, apparently. He needs to be better. That game should have been won by the Colts if their secondary caught any of those horribly thrown balls from Stroud. More impressed than the Colts than I was with the Texans. Obviously, Nico Collins, very good. Stephon Diggs, old, wily, great route runner. Very diligent in his efforts. Good blocker at times this game. I noticed that even if he wasn't doing a ton through the air, he was making a real effort to block. And he got open in the red zone when it mattered the most. So I'm glad he's succeeding on his new team. But the Texans, namely CJ Stroud and their defense, got to be better. The Colts, Anthony Richardson individually has got to be better, but they did a very good job. Jonathan Taylor, interior of their O-line, I guess, has to be better too. Quentin Nelson, shape it up, big dog. But very optimistic. The Jaguars, they should have won that game. The Jaguars blew that one of their own accord. I can see a little bit more what you're talking about with 3 teams from the AFC South making the playoffs, but it's not happening. It's just not happening. But the game everyone is dreading. The game no one wants to play. The ever-dangerous trap game took place for the Bengals week 1. Except they didn't realize this was a trap game. Nobody realized this was a trap game. They thought they were going to cruise on through New England, smoke them, put 50 points on them, big deal, on to the next week. Start game planning for a few of those tough AFC North opponents. Wrong. Jamar Chase, greatly limited, claimed he had food poisoning. I think Christian Gonzalez is the source of his food poisoning. That man had him in shackles all day. If he had been in a bit better shape, used to playing football, maybe that doesn't happen. No T. Higgins, no passing attack. A pathetic offensive showing from the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about Joe Mixon in the last segment. He was the only thing propping up that Bengals rushing attack. Their interior O-line is pathetic. It was why they lost the Super Bowl, and it hasn't gotten any better. Zach Moss seems like a fine guy, successful on the Colts last year. He's not good enough to overcome how bad that line is. They're not going to be able to do anything on the ground this year. Unless Chase gets back and is fully healthy and T. Higgins gets back on the field with his hamstring, this offense is going to be woeful. And people are using it as an excuse to say, oh, well, the Bengals, they're always bad the first 2 weeks of the season. Yeah, starting 0-2 every year is not a recipe for success. It's how you miss the playoffs. It's how you finish last in your division. Spotting the other teams in your division 2 games is a bad move, particularly when you play in one of the 2 best divisions in all of football. A pathetic showing from all parties involved. Joe Burrow, I drafted you as my fantasy quarterback in 2 of my leagues. What was that? Zach Taylor, what are we doing? That Chinese dictionary I talked about Dennis Allen needing to brush up on last week, you might be in line to get one of those, pal. Truly a distasteful game to watch. On the Patriots side, I'm not giving you any credit. Your offense looked terrible with the exception of Ramondre Stevenson. Congratulations, you may have a top 15 running back. Defensively, Gonzalez did great. Your D-line did great. Your secondary as a whole was very productive. But I think that is more so a result of the Bengals being bad. The Patriots are still not a good team. But dear God, Cincinnati, what are we doing?
Well, I'm not hitting the panic button on the Bengals quite yet. I'm not even close to hitting it because you take a look at some of the turnovers they had. If they don't fumble the ball heading into the end zone, that's 7 points, enough to win the game. If they don't have a punt blocked by the Patriots, which gifts them 3 points, that's enough to also help them win the game. So panic button is not getting hit yet. I think over the course of the season, they'll be kicking themselves when they're trying to make a wild card push because they dropped an easy week 1 win to the Patriots. And on the Patriots side of things, something we didn't expect to see. We didn't expect them to win this game. And I think what we saw is a defense that's still very good, even with Bill Belichick no longer coaching the team. And we saw an offense that is better coached than any of us expected, albeit it didn't look good because they also don't have a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball. So I think their ceiling went from 1, 2 wins to 3 or 4
You don't
wins
know what
now.
a ceiling means. Dear God,
You don't know what a ceiling means.
A one-win ceiling? A one-win
That's how bad I
ceiling?
thought they were going to be.
An NFL team with a one-win ceiling? Oh my God, man. Goodness. Next week on Thicc Man Inc., we are breaking out the dictionaries. The offense did not shoot themselves in the foot. For a team like the Patriots, that is the best possible outcome you could expect. They are a long way away from leading dynamic passing attacks with Drake May. I saw very little I was surprised by. Stevenson played better than I expected. Maybe that's your solution. Have a big, bruising running back, just churn it up the middle for 3, 4, 5 yards a chunk and try and take the air out of the ball and end games as quickly as possible. It's what the Chargers did. Their afternoon game finished 30 minutes plus before every other team's. Maybe that's going to be the Patriot way from now on. Just play Michigan-style football and try and get out with a win. Whew, that was not a result I was expecting. A lot of people's Survivor Leagues immediately up in flames thanks to that Cincinnati game. That was an 8.5 point spread. Vegas had a lot riding on the Bengals.
Some dedicated Patriots fans won some money this past weekend.
Some lunatic Patriots fans won some money this past weekend because no one in their right mind should have thought the Patriots would win that game.
That has been our week 1 reactions. Let us know what you think about your favorite team's performance. What were the biggest surprises to you of week 1? What are you looking forward to now over the course of the season from the storylines that were just created or emphasized? Like the video, subscribe. If you want to check out Underdog, use code Thicc. You can get a deposit match up to $1,000 right now. They have promos going every week of September. Again, like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.